Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to join today here as a proud member of the 4 per 1,000 initiative since this year. And I'm happy to share with you some of our experience over the last 45 years. You have kindly mentioned that SEKEM has been established 1977 already. And it was my dear father, my late father, Abouleish, who established it, and he is the visionary behind SEKEM, and we in the future Councilor of SEKEM are trying to follow path, and I will give you some updates on this. Wonderful. So let me start where SEKEM started, and this is in 1977 with a mission and vision, and next. It was my father who then established, living in Austria, where I was born, my mother, my sister, and my father lived. But he is a born Egyptian in 1977. Had the feeling that he wants to go back to his home country and establish a community in the desert based on living soils. Because he was very, very sure that living soils are the perfect ground for living communities and living souls, and saw a connection between this. And this is why he wanted to do this in living of the desert with biodynamic agriculture. Now, biodynamic agriculture then in 1977 was not practiced outside Europe. And so everybody told him, no way, no biodynamic agriculture in the desert. Forget about this. The experts. But not only that, he was stubborn enough as a pharmacist, not as a biodynamic farmer. He had no idea about farming, to be still assured that he will be able to reclaim desert through biodynamic agriculture. He also wanted to connect this to a different way to do business along the supply chain, to connect the partners in the supply chain, from farmers to consumers. And he created a movement which we call nowadays economy of love, and it's in Arabic much more beautiful to hear, Iqtisad al-Mahabba. But again, when anyone in the 1977s heard the term economy of love, you can imagine what he thought about. Hugging and kissing and not very, very competitive agricultural and business practices. Yeah? So again, people were now getting more and more sure that he must have had a very strong sunstroke or something. So biodynamic agriculture, no go. Economy of love, no go. But not this alone was the beginning of a visionary trip. And I'm telling these stories just because it's easy after 45 years to look to a lighthouse in the desert, but you have to imagine the beginning. And then he said, okay, but we will be very, very successful, of course. Biodynamic agriculture, economy of love, how can be anything else? So then we will have some added value, and we need to reinvest this added value into what is really the focus of our initiative. And what is the focus of our initiative? It's the people and their potential unfolding. And we shouldn't forget that even agriculture doesn't matter and that the business doesn't matter. But what really matters is that people learn while they work and that they can unfold their potential. And then everyone told him, you didn't get it in school, because this is the role of the government. I mean, the people go to school and then to university, and there they learn, and you should make the best use of the workforce and get the highest return on investment. And you shouldn't care for the people as much as you care for profit. So another no-go. And because everyone was sure it will not work anyhow, so they just said, okay, and he will not reach this. But he was still courageous enough to add another dimension. And he, in 1977, said, and not only should we care for the individual potential unfolding, but we should also care for community development, because the community is what carries us. The community is what matters. The community is what is really living on the soil and which must be nurtured. Now it was clear, I mean, the term corporate social responsibility did not exist. And it was very clear that this is going to take few weeks, few months. Then my father has lost his money, and everyone told him, at least don't sell your house in Austria, so that when you have lost everything, you can come back and then you start again and everything is great. And then he sold the house. So immediately he made it very clear that he is going to do it. So this is the story of the beginning. And I'm just saying it needs some time, a mission impossible. It needs a vision of what the future really wants from us. And this future does not have to be the linear past knowledge and experience you have. Very often as a visionary, you allow the future to land. But the future is not the past. And it's not related to everything you know. Now, we jump. On our next slide, you will see, obviously, I'm standing here because against all odds, it worked out. And against all odds, today, there are thousands of farmers who work biodynamically in Egypt successfully. There are 2,000 people working at SEKEM and processing out of biodynamic raw materials, food and pharmaceuticals and garments. And guess what? 80% of what we do gets sold in Egypt. And Egypt is not a particular big market for Demeter or organic products. So it needs a lot of entrepreneurial skills to sell your organic and Demeter products in the Egyptian market. But not only that we sell them in the Egyptian market, we compete in the Egyptian market with multinational companies, small ones, Unilever, Nestle, and so on. And they are in the same segments, and still we are market leaders. This is strange, huh? Economy of love, market leaders, Unilever. Anyhow, I respect Unilever very much, and Lipton and everything, and I'm just telling this to tell you how crazy things can come. And then, beside all this, we have really enforced this dream of our visionary founder, and every single one of these 2,000 people has time to unfold his potential in the working time. So SEKEM, as he always was dreaming, is a big school, not a company. And we have schools for 800 kids, and we have the Heliopolis University for Sustainable Development, the first university for sustainable development in the region, with 3,000 students, and a hospital, and integrative health, and many, 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 many projects. So it's a big question now, which I can explore with you on another day, why all this could happen. But let me go to the 4 per minute, which is today's topic, and just let's move one slide on, because in 2017, when my father passed away at the age of 80, and it was the 40th birthday of SEKEM, we in the Future Council came together and asked ourselves now, did we actually now achieve this dream? Did we achieve this vision? Because the vision was ending on on our website. You will find that this should be a model for Egypt and the world, and it should be upscaled and it should be replicable. And then we were looking around after 40 years, and we were still a lighthouse in the desert, and many, many people come and go from Egypt and from outside Egypt, but it doesn't replicate into the society. And this is when we then took a decision in a long process with all of our friends and networks to create a new vision for the next 40 years. And when you look into our next slide, and I will not dig into this, but you will see that we actually said SEKEM does not need to go and continue to grow and have more farms and more tea bags and more schools and more students. What SEKEM really wants is to disseminate our ideas into society, to reach the 7 million farmers of Egypt, the 1.6 million teachers, the 3 million entrepreneurs, the 600,000 academicians, and. So a totally refocus of what we are going to do the next 40 years. And this is why it's called the Vision for 2057. And then we said, and if we are going to do this successfully, then Egypt will look different. And we defined a vision on our next slide. You will see it for Egypt in 2057, which is a humble approach, of course, to have a vision for Egypt in 2057. But we said, if we are successful, then Egypt will be 100% organic, biodynamic, regenerative agriculture. Every company in Egypt will apply the principles of Iqtisad al-Mahabba or economy of love or whatever you want to call it. And every single institution in Egypt will understand that learning is a lifelong process, and it's about potential unfolding and not about filling the heads with kind of knowledge and things like this. And many, many other things, 16 SEKEM vision goals, you are all welcome to see them. I will focus on one, okay? This is the first one we started on in 2017. And it was this, next slide, you will see this vision to have Egypt 100% organic. And to do this, we said, okay, let's see why it isn't organic. And on our next slide, you see then we did a dog trial. This is comparative trial between conventional, organic, and biodynamic agriculture. And very similar results to the feeble studies in Switzerland. And then we did a true cost accounting report. And this is an interesting thing because the true cost accounting report proved for Egypt basically that, as in every other country, as in Germany, and I'm now saying Germany only because Germany is a much further developed country in this context, and as an example, but in Germany, 8% of the German population eats organic, and 92% does not. In France, it's less. Many other countries, it's less or more. It doesn't matter. In Egypt, it's 0.8%. And it's always the price which matters. And in our minds of consumers, Adam Smith is very strong, and we still believe cheap is the name of the game. And so we said, okay, is it really more expensive, organic? And no, it's not. As everywhere else, with true cost accounting, organic farming is today cheaper. If you consider all the externalized costs, consider the pollution of water, of air, of cells, of everything, and then consider the future costs for our next generations to come, dealing with climate change when you emit as a farmer instead of sequester carbon as a farmer. Putting all this into account, I show you now one example on our next slide very quickly, because I'm running out of time. If you go into a supermarket here in Egypt, and you will find ISIS or SEKEM products in nearly every supermarket, even in Sharm El-Sheikh, also in Cairo, then you will have a look, and then you will see that our SEKEM Demeter anise tea, the best in the world, but it costs £20 per box, okay? Here on the left side. Oh, it's on the next slide. And then you see another box, conventional anise tea, also very good, but it costs only £16. And so the question is this the true cost, what you see? And when you then make a simple cost accounting according to FAO methodology, you will find that there's an additional cost of water pollution of every box of conventional anise in Egypt of £5, an additional cost of every box of nearly £1 for greenhouse gas emissions for a conventional. And then the 16 are 22. This is the true cost. Huh? This is the reality, which unfortunately doesn't work with German consumers nor with Egyptian consumers. You can tell this story until you die and nobody cares. But it's good to know. So we said, okay, because we don't want to die, we want to change the world. Let's see how we can monetize some of this externalized cost. And we started with the CO2, and now comes the connection to 4 per mil, finally. Because then we said, okay, let's see what is going on in our soils regarding carbon. And on our next slide, you will see we prototyped this in 2019 or something in our farm, in a wonderful farm, which is open for visits in Egypt, in the desert. And guess what? I'm making it very short now. We could prove that we sequester in trees and soil up to 35, 40 tons of CO2 equivalent carbon per year, per hectare. And this is obviously a game changer when you know that Egypt's average agricultural emissions are 5 tons per year on every acre, 10 tons on every hectare. So average conventional farming emissions of 10 tons, we sequester 30 to 40. And this is the potential of the 4 per mil. Exactly what is the mission of the 4 per mil, to gain this difference between -10 and +30, 40. And we did it, and it was a nice additional income, which enabled us to do better work. But we said, okay, now what about upscaling? And so we went on our next slide, you will see it in the last 2 years to 2,000 smallholder farms along the Nile, not in the Delta, not in the desert, from Aswan to Alexandria. Okay, smallholder farmer means 1, 2, 3 acres or hectares. And we said, okay, what's going to happen there? And obviously in the Delta, you don't need as much compost as we need, and you have less trees and so on and so on. So they only sequestered, as you can see here, about 20 tons per hectare. But guess what? And now comes the nice part of this story, which is giving us the hope of system change in Egypt. These 20 tons per hectare, when you sell them on a voluntary carbon market for 25 euros, are 500 euros. And every farmer here from Egypt, and there are not a lot of farmers from Egypt here, but every farmer in the world knows that a farmer nowadays does not earn easily this amount of money per acre or per hectare. So having an additional income, which is higher than the income from your cotton, potato, or chamomile crop, is a game changer. Because now we could tell our farmer in Aswan or in Alexandria, you go biodynamically, you sell at conventional price. So then we have no problem anymore that anyone buys. You get agricultural carbon credits and your income doubles. And you sequester 20, 30, 40 tons of CO2 in your hectare or in your land. And so I hope you hear it. Huh? So we think that with this example, you could prove that there is now a system change possible, that we can help farmers to go from conventional, regenerative, organic, biodynamic agriculture, to improve their livelihoods, but this is the important thing for every farmer in Egypt, because they are all living on the edge of poverty and have a fantastic climate impact. And this is what you will see on our next slide, is the reason why we came here to COP27 as simple farmers as myself, to tell to the world, to the negotiators, to Koro, Viva, and whatever else, we will go next year to 40,000 farmers, okay? And this will sequester 1.5 million tons. And we will go in 3 years to 250,000 farmers. And this will be 10 million tons of CO2 per year. And this is an initiative of farmers, huh? And farmers are the climate heroes. And I was in the blue zone and the green zone and every zone you can imagine, even in the red zone. And yeah, believe it or not, I was there. And it's so fantastic for me to be there as a farmer, because everyone speaks about net zero, huh? Net zero, net zero, net zero, as if it would be possible for anyone in the world to go to net zero. For no human being and for no industry in the world, you go to net zero, of course. I mean, you can improve, you can improve, you can improve, and in the end, you have emissions. And we, to go to net zero, have to commit suicide, and companies have to close. So this is not going to happen. Who is going to balance the remaining CO2 emissions of all the industries of the world, whatever you speak about? It's agriculture, forests, and oceans. And we will be a big part. And if in 2030 we need 3.5 gigatons of carbon sinks, who's going to be the carbon sink? It's not going to be my electric car and other things I'm using to improve my energy efficiency, not even renewable energy. It's going to be agriculture. So we hope that through this initiative and the ambition to honor farmers for their ecosystem services and make farmers happy and wealthy again, and make rural life worthwhile again, which is then the social impact of this, because instead of running to Cairo slums, you can stay, you can have a nice livelihood, and you can have services, and you can send your kids to school and university and so on, when we just honor the farmer for their services. And this is what we call for. We call the governments, we call the society, we call our fellow friends, businessmen in Egypt and outside, just include farmers as the big part of the solution. And by doing so, we will go automatically to more regenerative agricultural practices. We will use soils as carbon sinks. And I'm very, very optimistic. I believe that then ultimately farmers who are the big losers of the last 200 years will be the big winners of the next 200 years. Now, still, there are people who do not believe that this is possible, but we don't know something called Mission Impossible. We are hopeless optimists in SEKEM, and we believe that we have to have the courage to do the next step. And in this, we follow a very, very well-known German poet. And on my next slide, you will see what he thought about this before climate change was on the agenda. He said it nicely. He said, it's knowing is not enough, you have to apply. Huh? And even willing is not enough, you have to do it. And this is what I really call for in the whole world. Thank you very much.